Good morning, church. It is so good to be here this morning with you. If you're traveling through, we want to say thank you for joining us this morning. But if you're searching for a congregation to be a part of, I hope you search really well here. We have such a great variety of learning environments for our children, for our youth, and also for our adults. And if you want to know more about that, we have a website that has full of information, or find me or one of the ministers or elders after church, and they'll enlighten you on some of that information. My name is Mark Hixon. I'm the youth minister here, and usually holidays, that's when the youth minister gets to speak, right? All right, that's usually, youth minister never goes on holiday because he's always speaking. Every church I've been to, that seems to be the opportunity the youth minister gets. But I wanted to think about something, I want you to think about one thing, is that we're incredibly busy in all of our lives. All of us are incredibly busy. We have so much going on. Some of it is self-inflicting. Some of it is we just honestly have a lot going on. When Sandy and I first got married, we both had, or she had a job and I worked. I had a friend tell me I was a real go-getter. I took her to work and then I went and got her. That's a joke, all right? We would go to work, I'd go to school, and come back home, and we'd sit and watch movies and just have that good quality time together, hang out with friends, go to church, and we were just busy. We had no time for anything else. We were just extremely busy, right? And then we had Addison. Then we had our first child, right? We didn't understand what busy was until we had our first kid. We had no idea what that was like. And then we're trying to figure it out, like, okay, there's no more just going to the grocery store or just running into the gas station. There's none of that. Now you have to kind of schedule your life a little bit more, right? We thought we were busy, and then we had Avery. And we had child number two. There's two of us and two of them, right? We're extremely busy. Sandy and I both had full-time jobs, and we had two kids, and we're trying to figure out life, and we just couldn't figure out, where do we have time to rest? Where do we have time to do other activities? And then we thought we were busy until we had Ava, our third kid, and we were extremely busy. We're like, where did all this extra time come from? We have no more time in our schedule to do things. And we thought we were busy, and then we had Joe. We had our fourth kid, and come to find out we have extra time because we're able to squeeze a fourth child into our life. And the reason we had more time is because people quit inviting us to their house, right? Because all the four kids. But the beautiful thing about that is we had some great neighbors. They're actually here today, and they have 5 kids. So bless them. So we'd all just hang out. We'd throw our kids in the middle of the living room and just let them play with each other. And so if they broke something, well, they'd come over to our house and break something. So we'd swap out whose house got broken. But we always think that we're busy until we add more stuff to our life. And then we're like, we can't get any busier, right? We keep adding more things to our life. You realize there's only 168 hours in your work week. Well, in your week, 7 days a week, 168 hours. So there's 24 hours, 7 days, 168 hours. Time is the most valuable thing, the most valuable asset that we have. Time is the most valuable asset we have. Think about that for a second. 168 hours. The cool thing about the hours, it doesn't matter if you're rich, if you're poor, if you're sick, if you're disabled, you get 168 hours. You can't buy more hours. You can't return more hours. You have 168 hours to do your activities. 168 hours. We get so busy, sometimes we forget about rest. Rest is incredibly important for our bodies, for mental, spiritual, and physical just rejuvenation, for recharging. See, there was this creator God who we worship. This creator God, he created the heavens and he created the earth. And then he, what? On the 7th day, he rested. So you're trying to tell me the God who created the heavens and earth and all eternity, all the power that we could ever imagine, all the strength, all the energy, and you were saying that he rested. Right? Think about that for a second. He rested. For one thing, it makes me feel less bad about resting. And let's take a look at just the scripture within itself. We're going to read a lot of scripture. Is that okay with y'all today? It's Genesis chapter 1, all the way to chapter 2. And I want to think about how much work went into to creation of the earth and then God resting. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and now the earth was formless and empty, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day. And God said, let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water. So God made the vault and separated water until the vault was from the water above it. And it was so. God called the vault sky. And there was evening, and there was morning the second day. And God said, let the water under the sky be gathered into one place. Let the dry ground appear. And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and he gathered waters, and he called seas. God saw it, and it was good. Then God said, let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants, and trees on the land that bear fruit, and the seed in it, according to the various kinds. And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it, according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning the third day. And God said, let there be light. Let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate day from night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years. And let them be lights to vault the sky and give light to the earth. And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set the vault in the sky to give light on the earth, to govern day and night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning the fourth day. And God said, let the water teem with living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky. So God created the great creatures of the sea and every living thing with which the water teems and moves about it, according to their kinds. And every winged bird according to their kind. And God saw it, and it was good. God blessed them and said, be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the water and the seas, and let the birds increase on the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning the fifth day. And God said, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, the wild animals, each according to its kind. And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. God saw it was good. And then God said, let's make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the seas and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful, increase in your number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. And God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. To all the beasts and all the earth and the birds in the sky and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has breath of life in it. I give every green plant for food. And it was so. God saw all they had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning the sixth day. Chapter 2, thus the heavens and the earth were complete in all their vast array. By the seventh day, God finished the work that had been doing, and on the seventh day, what did he do, church? He rested from all of his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from the work that he creating that he had done. There are two things we're extremely empty of in our lives. That is time and rest. We work really hard. We have great intentions. We get up in the morning, we think about what do we need to do next at our work. If you're anything like me, I get up, I get the kids to school, I go to the office, and I work, and then I go home for lunch, then I go back to the office, and I work, and then I go home, for dinner, and then we go to bed. I put so much importance on the work, sometimes I forget the intentionality of resting and soaking that in. I want to think a little bit about the Sabbath. The Sabbath was a time that God commanded, actually in Exodus. God commanded the Sabbath, a time of rest and time of reflection. It was a time, it's still practiced today. It is a time where people just stop and they pause in life and they breathe and they soak in who God is. And some rituals of the Sabbath, they actually come together as a family and they sing songs and they rehash out the stories of Scripture and talk about where God has taken their ancestors from. And they spend their whole day doing this, much like what we do here at church. And they come together and they sing and they eat and they partake. But during that time of the Sabbath, it's something they took very seriously. Here, let's just take a look at Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 20. And this is in the middle of the Ten Commandments. You got to remember, God has now rescued the Israelites from bondage and slavery, right? And for God to be in the presence of these people, he has said that, listen, I have to be in a holy place. And so here's some rules, some guidelines that you must follow in that. And I kind of attribute to it in a negative sense, in a good way, is a lot like a student getting in trouble on a football team, or a student getting in trouble at school, and the principal or the coach is giving them one more shot, right? He's looking at him, he's saying, listen, here's the rules and the guidelines you need to follow. Here's the rules and guidelines you need to follow. I'm going to be watching you, right? You need to follow this so I can work with you. I need to know you're bought into this relationship. And so here's the 10 Commandments in Exodus 20, verses 8. He says this, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do anything, any work, neither you nor your son nor your daughter, nor male or female servant, nor your animals, nor foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. And this is a commandment that God passed down. Here's the tricky question I want you to think about. Why was it in Genesis, after all that creation story, all that work, that we're told that God rested? Why has that lasted for generations after generations? Not only that, several generations later, when the Ten Commandments came out, he made it a decree, he made it a command, he made it a law, he made it a rule by which his people must follow. Now you say, well, Mark, some of them were cooking and they were eating and they were fellowshipping to one another. Yes, they were, because they were very intentional about that day. They had to prepare, along with all their busyness in their work, they had to prepare for that day of Sabbath. They had to do all that work before, but it is very intentional that we will not work on this day. And it's a day of rest and recharging. They took this very seriously. Because in Numbers, I don't have the scripture up there, but in Numbers, there's a story of a man gathering wood on the Sabbath day. And people caught him gathering wood, and they brought him to Moses, and Moses talked to God, and we got to kill him. Think about that. They took the Sabbath so seriously that they were going to kill someone to keep the pureness of the day of rest. It's pretty scary with that. Now, some of you may say, well, Mark, what does this have to do with us? I said, I think it's an example that we should live by, an example of being intentional about taking a day of rest. If it's not a day, it can be hours here and there of intentionally not looking at your phone, not working, not doing anything that you daily do, but to stop and to reflect on who God is. One of the most powerful times in my life, shaping of my life, was when I had a different job and different career. It was pretty stressful, going in and out of projects. It was just ongoing, and of course having 4 kids all at the same time, trying to do that, I was just stressed out. So I made a point that every day before I went into the office, I didn't care if I was going to be late, I was going to read several chapters of Proverbs, intentionally on Proverbs, looking for wisdom, because I cared more about my relationship with God, my relationship with my wife and my family at that moment. I felt like I needed to do something else because I was not putting the personal time in praying about that. And when I was doing that, I was able to walk around and asking God to show me where he is at work in front of me. Sometimes your Sabbath is not just stopping, but it's also reflecting and being recharged by God. Some of you may say, but hey, Mark, we don't follow that Old Testament stuff. We're Jesus followers. And so what does Jesus have to say about the Sabbath? And I mean, he's got some of that going on. So here's some scripture of Jesus. And Jesus, let me tell you a little bit about Jesus. I love Jesus, and I love the Jesus story for many reasons. One is because he bucks the system, the religious system. He goes against the religious system. And he's saying, you have it all wrong, people. You have the right language. You have the right to know these things. But you're now making it a law, and you're holding it over people to where they can't even measure up to what law you're holding them to. And Jesus brings in a new vision for us about that. In chapter 12, he says, at this time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath, and his disciples were hungry. They began to pick some heads of grain and eat them. When the Pharisees saw this, the Pharisees would be the religious sect of people that like to toss the law around. They saw this, and they said to him, look, your disciples are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath. I love this, because Jesus is kind of like, come on, guys. It's not that big of a deal. Let's just go with the flow. But now we got to sit here and we got to talk about this for a while, right? You ever do that? You ever have an argument with your kid or something? You're like, just pick up your room. Well, I did pick up the room, and it's just like, they picked up one crayon. You're like, oh, now I got to spend the next 20 minutes parenting if you just picked up the room, right? And Jesus says this. He says, he answered, haven't you read that what David did when he was in his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God, and he and his companions ate the consecrated bread, which is not lawful for them to do, but only for the priests. Or haven't you read the law that the priests on the Sabbath duty in the temple desecrated the Sabbath, and yet they are innocent? I tell you, something greater than the temple is here. If you had known what these words mean, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent. For the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. Verse 9, going on from that place, he went into their synagogue. I love this, because it's like saying, I'm going to show you. I'm going to tell you these things, and I'm just going to show you. The point of the Sabbath the point of all of this is doing good. Right? It's not about stopping and not helping. It's about doing good and helping others. Going on from that place, they went to the synagogue, and the man with the shriveled hand was there. Looking for a reason to bring charges against Jesus, they asked him, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? I can imagine Jesus saying, that's a stupid question. I'm here to help. I'm here to help. And Jesus said to them, if any of you have a sheep that falls into the pit on the Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a person than a sheep? Therefore, it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. He places a new command there. It's lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Then he said to the man, stretch out your hand. So he stretched out his hand, and it was completely restored, just as sound as the other. But the Pharisees went out and plotted how they might kill Jesus. See, the idea of Sabbath and stopping and reflecting and soaking in, it was also meant to be a time to discern what God is doing in front of you. When your eyes are open and you're studying and you're reflecting, rules seem to fall off. And you start looking at the greater good and the greater purpose that we are designed to do. 2 great commandments, Jesus said, is to love God and to love your neighbor. Jesus went on to say this in Mark chapter 2, verses 27. He said to them that the Sabbath was made for man, not the man for Sabbath. Folks, we have to be intentional about our reflection, about our time with our Creator God. We have to be very intentional. We need to be better about saying yes to the word no. Some of you may not understand what I'm saying. You have to be intentional to be of saying yes to the word no. In other words, I see families being in youth ministry, especially in another state, moving up here, that lives just get so full that they don't know what to do with themselves. I had one family, loved them dearly, but during baseball season, I never saw them. Let me rephrase that. I saw them when they pulled up to church late, came in, took communion, and turned around and left church to go to ball practice. That's the only time I saw them. And whenever I did see them as well, they were always separate. They're all going 5 different directions. They had 4 kids. They're going so many different directions. Because playing ball games and whatnot, that's not necessarily the bad thing, right? But that was their life year round. I think there's seasons for that. There's seasons when you can look out and say, listen, for this next month, I'm going to be just packed full, and there's not going to be a lot of time to rest. But I know when that's done, I'm being intentional. I'm going to go camping, or I'm going to go just stop and reflect on what God has done for me. But when you develop this sense of constantly going, you lose connection with yourself and the reality of your family unit and who you are. Are you with me? Okay. I'm going to get on a soapbox just for a second. Sandy's a stay-at-home mom, and some of that's kind of by choice. And she and I both worked had very excellent careers at one time. But when our kids, when you got 3 kids at that time, then went to 4, our day, especially during this time of year and flu season, our day was like this. Okay, whose boss are we going to make mad today? Right? It was, okay, I can go until noon, and then I'll come home and save the kids, and you go in at noon, right? But what we ended up doing is we ended up with 2 separate lives. Going on our own career, our own direction. And the only time we came together was to be together with the kids. When we got together with the kids, we were so exhausted that we did not have a relationship to build off of. I think there's something to be said about not winning at work. Something to be said about not playing on every ball team that you can get a chance to play on. There's something to be said about stopping and pausing and saying, no, we're not going to do that. But Dad, we're going to miss out on some stuff, but I'm going to miss out on possibly getting this promotion and this sale. Yes, you will. You will miss out on that. But as a dad, I much rather have my family unit than my kid having an A in school or my kid playing ball. It's going to take a lot of us in our work environments, in our athletic environments, and I'm going to be frank with you. It's got to be the kids that can actually play, that are good, and their families to say, hey, coach, my kids aren't going to be there this Friday. You can have them all next week, but this Friday they just can't be there. A good friend of mine who's a churchgoer, I love him to death. He's the coach of one of these teams, and I asked him about this. I said, hey, what are you doing with your students that are pretty heavy into church and their environment? He says, simply, I respect what they're doing, but their kid just won't play. That's tough for that kid because that kid wants to play, right? But again, don't mishear me. I think if you say, hey, listen, for this baseball season this fall, we're going to do in baseball, and we're going to be in and out, and we're going to be living Jesus out on the ball field and teaching some other parents or just being around, being an example of life. But when we fall into the trap of making this a year-round thing, we've lost it. We've lost our connection. My real desire for you to get is to stop and pause and be intentional about your reflection on your family, because God gave you that, right? On your children, because God gave you that. On your church body, because God gave you that. To your friends, because God gave you that. And you have a self-responsibility to be fully energized in those environments. And you cannot be fully energized if you're living at 50% on 100 things when you should be living at 100% on 10 things. By the way, I say this out of guilt on myself. I tend to do 100 things. Church is one of them, guys. Because there's 100 things to do at church does not necessarily mean we all have to be involved doing it. You with me? I'm saying that, and the elder may correct me, but I'm saying for the health of your family. Too many times I'm reading stories of friends that I grew up going to church with. We're involved as share group leaders, and they're divorced now. Their families are broken, but we were always together. We were always praying together. We were always reflecting, but they were never stopping and reflecting in those free moments of time to build on their relationship. Are you with me? Come and be 100% a part of our church family. Put a pause on it. Pause button. Sometimes I've started doing this at home. My kids say to their friends, I think I was talking to Tiffany Clem about this the other day. The kids wanted to spend the night with the Clem's house, and they told her, don't ask Dad because he'll say no. Right? Dad's default answer is no. Right? Because if I think it's going to take away from us or an opportunity that we can get together and build on our family, my answer is just no. And guys, that's a model. That's something I want to do. Am I good at it? No. I come home and I'm like, I got to clean the garage. Got to do something else. And I don't stop as well. We must find intentional balance between what the world requires of us and our connection with our Creator. An intentional balance between what the world requires of us and a connection with our Creator. We need to quit emptying ourselves into the world treasures and pour ourselves out into the Creator. Our riches, our desires, our sensualities, our directions will be clearer because we are in harmony with God. Some of you may ask, well, how do you do this? I think Paul writes this in Ephesians and a couple other letters. He says this in Ephesians 5:15. He says, be careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Do not get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another in psalms, hymns, songs from the Spirit. Sing and make music in your heart to the Lord, always giving thanks to God the Father for everything in the name of the Lord. I love this line right here. But understand what the Lord's will is. Folks, we cannot do that unless we're stopping and intentionally reflecting on what God's will is for each of us. Many are here with us today. We're holding a burden. We're crying out for a release. Been there. Some of you will be there for many times. Let me encourage you today to be intentional with the most valuable asset you have, and that is your time. Take time to rest. Not only to rest with sleep, but rest in knowledge and release of these burdens to God. I'm talking about sitting down, going for a long drive, listening to music, and just opening it up to God. Just talking. Just start the conversation. A lot of conversations that start with God in this, I'm driving down the road, and I'm like, God, this is awkward. I'm talking out loud to you. Don't really know. I feel fake. Next thing I know, I'm in this heart-wrenching release and asking God to fill me up again. Let me encourage you to take some intention to do that. For those of you that are carrying a heavy burden, Jesus says, come to me, all you who labor and are burdened, and I will give you what? Rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and humble of heart, and you will find rest for yourselves, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Today, if you need to release a burden, you think the church can help you with that. Here in a minute, we're going to sing a song, and that is a perfect opportunity for you to come down here and talk to one of our ministers or elders, and they want to pray with you to help you release that energy that you have, and that conversation is between you, them, and God, unless you want the church to know about it and you want the church to help carry that burden. Let me encourage you to do that. If you don't do it here, let me encourage you to talk to your spouse. Talk to your friend. Talk to someone you're in share group with to release that burden that you have. Seek the help and become recharged in God. If you would, stand and sing. Just as I am.